What you've just heard is one of the many deaths from the monkey, the new major motion picture from Osgood Perkins, Stephen King, and James Wan. Experience it in theaters everywhere this Friday, because everybody dies, and that's life. Let's have some fun.
Hey guys, Madame Ram, starring Toni Collette, tells the dramatized true story of Georgia Frontiere, a former entertainer turned owner and heavy hitter in the boys' club that is the NFL. After her husband's mysterious death, she shocks everyone by inheriting the LA Rams and taking the reins of a major sports franchise. Relying on her wit and astrological charts to make decisions, she turns the NFL on its head and to this day remains one of the most beloved, despised, and controversial figures in modern sports. You guys, I started listening to this and I am absolutely hooked. The twists and turns, I didn't see any of them coming, and I have so many questions. I cannot wait to continue to tune in. The woman who went from singer to NFL owner, defying expectations and shaking up the world of professional football. Madame Ram dives into her relentless quest for respect, power, and a championship trophy. This isn't your typical sports story. Follow Georgia Frontiere as she navigates a male-dominated industry using star charts and sheer determination to make her mark in history. Whether you love football, powerful struggles, or just a good scandal, Madame Ram has it all. Ambition, mystery, and the unforgettable legacy of a woman who refused to stay on the sidelines. Madame Ram, the woman who took on a man's world and won. Follow Madame Ram on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Big Mad True Crime, where we get big mad over true crime. I'm your host, Heather Ashley, and today's case is out of Buckeye, Arizona. Small talk sucks, so let's dive in. On July 18, 2016, the Buckeye Police Department made a post to Facebook asking residents in the area to please be on the lookout for 10-year-old Jesse Wilson. According to the department, he was last seen the previous night at around 9:30 p.m., but when his mom went to check on him later, he was gone. They believed he left the house through his bedroom window, but where he was now was a complete mystery. They described him as an African-American male, about 4 feet tall, 60 pounds, and was last seen wearing a red shirt, shorts of an unknown color, black socks, and black shoes. But there was no photo attached to this post. Obviously, people wondered how they could be on the lookout if they didn't have a photo to reference, but a commenter noted that the family had requested that no picture be circulated. That definitely felt wrong, like there was no way this was possible, but the police department confirmed that in further comments. Right off the bat, something felt off here, but there wasn't much time to waste because there was a child missing. Following that post, the search for Jesse didn't skip a beat. Volunteers lined up to assist the department, and they knew it wasn't going to be easy. While Buckeye isn't the biggest town in America, it is in the middle of the desert. The street Jesse disappeared from, West Twilight Trail, was on the edge of a neighborhood that backed up to I-10, and on the other side of that interstate was vast nothingness. And it was the middle of July. The temperatures that week peaked above 110 degrees, so searchers knew that this was going to be difficult, but if it was difficult for them, they couldn't imagine how hard it would be for a 10-year-old to survive in that heat. They needed to find Jesse, and they needed to find him fast. Within a few hours, the Buckeye police updated their social media to include a photo, and with a face to match the name, everyone knew who they were looking for, and they went out. There was hope in the first 24 hours or even 48 hours that Jesse would be found, but as hard as volunteers and law enforcement searched, they found no sign of Jesse anywhere. His disappearance hit the local news pretty quickly, and by day 3, AZ Central reports that 100 volunteers were lined up and ready to help. Those volunteers included the mayor, as well as additional resources like the Department of Corrections, search and rescue teams, and the FBI. The Department of Corrections made sense because rumor had it that Jesse's mother may have worked there, but the FBI was a gut check. Locals had started to hear that Jesse may have run off before, but with the FBI in town, it felt like maybe this wasn't as simple as it seemed. Maybe there was more to the story, though the department assured citizens on Facebook that the FBI regularly assists on missing children's cases. With their fears eased, everyone headed out again into the sweltering heat, searching areas around his neighborhood and in a field by a Walmart at the base of it, but there was nothing. Law enforcement called in canines and helicopter units, but there was nothing. By midday, the search wrapped up and the community was at a loss. There were more questions than answers, and the silence was deafening, especially the silence from Jesse's family. The citizens of Buckeye remembered how they didn't initially want his photo shared and wondered why they hadn't seen anyone related to him pleading for his safe return. They saw his school show up. They even created a website for him to help spread awareness, but where were his parents?
Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Zysol is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Zysol keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all. Take Zysol. At night.
At 7:42 a.m. the following morning, so Thursday, July 21st, reporter Christopher Sine tweeted a photo of FBI agents wearing protective suits removing items from Jesse's home, a home that no one was in. As it turns out, AZ Central reports that the charter school Jesse went to 16 miles away was housing his mother and siblings in a room in their building. Jesse had a twin sister and one other biological brother that the public knew of at the time, and the school had been nice enough to house them all while the search for Jesse continued. And while that's nice and all, it led to even more questions, like why couldn't they stay in their house? Generally, when a child goes missing, someone always stays home in case said child returns. So why wasn't anyone there, and what had the police taken from that house? Things were getting weirder by the minute, and the suspicion was rising. With no new leads to go on, people just ruminated on what they did know, and it wasn't in favor of whatever was going on in that home. The public wondered why Jesse had run off in the past, and also wondered why he was last seen wearing shoes in his room at 9:30 p.m. the night before he disappeared. There was a lot of side-eye being cast, but finally, his mother, Crystal Wilson, made a statement. There was a press conference of sorts, and to Jesse, Crystal said, "This is your mommy. No one is mad at you." She started to cry as she added, "I miss your loving, caring, sweet ways. Your sister and your brother love you so much." Another day passed with no sign of Jesse, and on Friday, AZ Central released the 911 call that Crystal had made to report Jesse missing. The only problem with that, or at least the first problem, was that the call was not to 911. At around 1:40 a.m., Crystal called the non-emergency number and told the operator very slowly and very calmly, "My son has either climbed out the window, which he's done before, or he's gone out the back door, back gate." The dispatcher asked Crystal how old her son was, and Crystal fumbled the bag for a handful of seconds, pausing and repeating until she finally stated that he was 10. The dispatcher asked Crystal where she lived and again seemed to have a hard time recalling, but finally said West Davis Lane, but that's not where she lived. Even the dispatcher seemed confused and asked for clarification, and finally Crystal recalled her actual residence. She blamed it on the fact that they'd recently moved and apologized for being delirious. Crystal went on to state that police might want to see if Jesse went to the neighbor's house again like he had the last time, adding that she wasn't trying to repeat things on purpose, but the officer who dealt with Jesse before found him at the house on the corner and mentioned something inaudible about not liking when Jesse was around that man. That call elicited a lot of feelings. No one missed that there seemed to be a lack of panic or shock in Crystal's tone. No one missed that she couldn't seem to recall his age or her address, but all of that kind of fell to the wayside for a brief second, as people wondered who the man on the corner was and why Crystal didn't seem to like Jesse hanging out with him. Most any comments questioning Crystal's demeanor on the call were met with responses pleading for grace, asking the public not to judge Crystal so quickly since no one really knows how they would act in that situation. Though I do feel that I can confidently state that I would have been banging on every neighbor's door, turning on every headlight in the neighborhood, and commandeering a plane with night vision capabilities to find my child. But that's just me. The searches continued that day, and one person who said they volunteered posted online that Crystal was there and she just seemed off. All surrounding departments deployed additional K-9s, flew drones overhead, had searchers on foot, and even had Border Patrol assist, but once again, there was no sign of Jesse. That evening, Crystal spoke from the school again and, according to AZ Central, spoke about the child that Jesse was. She said that he was sweet and mischievous, a scholar with 2 left feet, a child who was great at reading but not athletic, adding that he was a snack grabber who would eat any sugar he could get his hands on. She laughed as she recalled how the school called her once, saying that Jesse had the runs because he was lactose intolerant and had eaten something he wasn't supposed to. And this interview right here was the moment that the red flags raised to the top for me. Some people know my story and others don't, but my childhood wasn't always ideal, and there were things in this interview that sucked the wind out of my soul. These comments were not anything I would expect to hear from a distraught mother looking for her missing son. She gave him backhanded compliments while embarrassing him, and her comments about his snacking did not pass the vibe check. A healthy child's food intake isn't a talking point, nor is it a quirk. All kids snack, all kids like sugar. The fact that she stated he was mischievous and then chose to recall his hunger and diarrhea publicly was a hard no for me. Crystal went on to talk about how a few weeks prior he had slipped out of his bedroom window, jumped onto an electrical box, and scratched his face in the process. The Buckeye Police Department had found him hanging out in the back of a pickup truck down the road, and when brought back to his house, Crystal said that he told her he just wanted to go to school because he loves school. And I loved school too. School always had food, and the teachers never degraded me. School was safe, it was consistent, and I always found ways to stay after school let out just so that I didn't have to go home. This interview with Crystal was supposed to be charming and anecdotal, but nothing about it was either. It only got worse when Crystal revealed that the dog Jesse loved more than anything in this world except maybe his siblings had been sent away. According to AZ Central, Crystal said she couldn't stand to see it without Jesse, and it was Jesse's chore to feed that dog. Your son is missing. No one is at that house in case he comes home, and the dog he loved with everything in him isn't a part of the family anymore. This is the exact opposite of what you would expect a desperate parent to do. You would expect a desperate parent to hold that dog up to every camera in the country and tell Jesse that his fur baby misses him and cannot wait for him to come home. And don't even get me started on the fact that she mentioned it was his chore to feed that dog. But let's keep going. On Saturday, July 23rd, I think pretty much everyone was on the same page. Locals who lived in the neighborhood were pissed that the photo being shared didn't even look like Jesse. According to one neighbor, she had last seen him on Thursday before he went missing, and his hair was much longer than the photos being circulated showed. She even supplied more updated pictures for the media to use, and she was right. He looked much different than the photos we had seen until now. As the moments passed, the public got more and more suspicious of Crystal, and neighbors were coming out of the woodwork. One neighbor, who we'll call Brenda, claimed that Crystal was quote-unquote batshit and claimed that Jesse's bed and dresser were bolted to the wall and his window was boarded up with plywood from inside. Now, if you're anything like me, you're wondering how Brenda might know this, and she had an explanation for that. She stated that when Crystal and the kids moved in, her husband was spraying for bugs and scorpions, and Crystal asked him if he could spray her house too. He reportedly did, and that's when he saw this. Brenda also stated that Crystal told her husband that her son is a badass and she's strict with her kids. Following that revelation, Brenda added that the FBI had taken control of Crystal's house. It had been taped off, Crystal was with them, and the remaining kids had been removed. All of that information was confirmed later that day by CBS 5, who added that Crystal's car had also been seized, and there weren't just 3 kids in that house, there had been 5. According to the outlet, law enforcement had spent the entire night there executing a search warrant on the home. It felt like maybe there was going to be some kind of major update coming here, but there wasn't. Jesse was not located, and Crystal was still at the school making statements. According to AZ Central, on Sunday, July 24th, Crystal, while holding a small white dog, said, "I just want to thank everybody for coming out, supporting, and helping us to find Jesse. I just want to let everybody know I appreciate everybody from the smallest child to the oldest adult. Thank you." Now, you might think that maybe that dog in her arms was Jesse's, but she made no mention of that whatsoever. It had officially been 1 week, and police were no closer to finding Jesse than when Crystal had called non-emergency. Over the following week, searches continued around Buckeye, and the police department set up a special tip line just for Jesse's case. Local reporter Mike Watkis tweeted that Domino's was taping Jesse's missing persons flyers into the boxes of every pizza ordered, but by Sunday, another week had passed with no sign of Jesse anywhere. Just like they had the Sunday before, Jesse's school held another event to keep his name in the media, but the news coverage had seemed to slow down. According to AZ Central, the school stated that they hoped Crystal would attend, but noted that police wouldn't be there. It seems wild that Crystal wouldn't be there since last we heard she was living there, but maybe she got her house back. I think the public was most shocked, though, by police not being there, but you have to remember that the county Jesse went to school in was not the county he disappeared from. So police taking resources away from the area they needed to be looking in wouldn't exactly be ideal, so this decision was not as show-stopping as people initially thought it was. August 1st, 2016 should have been Jesse's first day back at school, but his classmates and teachers had to start the year without him. The school set aside resources for the kids dealing with the trauma of their missing classmate and set Jesse's desk out front with his picture on it to show their support. It was a somber day in Buckeye, and that was only compounded by CBS 5's update that back when canines had been trying to track Jesse's scent around his home, they'd apparently picked up on nothing. Locals specified online that the dogs reportedly did pick up his scent inside the home, but didn't pick it up anywhere outside, not under his window and not by that gate. The window is where it was believed he had left from, and that window is not close to the ground. I would be terrified to jump out of that window, and I am an adult. There was no grass beneath it, and due to the desert terrain of that area, it was just pebbles. A fall from that window would have been painful, but we do know that he had done it in the past. Sure, there was a little electrical box attached to the side of the house, but it was really small. Crafting a way out of that window onto the thin box and then off of the side of the house feels like it would have to take some kind of desperation.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
On August 5th, a woman claiming to be Jesse's biological grandmother came forward, and that's when it was confirmed that Jesse had been adopted. Initially, he and his siblings had been placed into foster care and ultimately adopted by Crystal. The woman who came forward, Cynthia, was Jesse's biological grandmother and was Jesse's biological mom's mother. According to an interview Cynthia gave to AZ Family, she fought for years to get custody of her grandchildren, but says that she was cut off completely due to what she says was her credit score. Now, that didn't sound right to a lot of people, so I looked into it, and while I can't speak on her credit score, it does look like she might have had an issue in her past that may have raised an eyebrow, but it wasn't anything heinous. Those who seemed to know Cynthia stated that she was currently a realtor and absolutely had the means to care for her grandchildren. She told the outlet that she reached out to the police department once she realized it was Jesse who had gone missing, but hadn't heard back. Looking at the situation from the outside, it was probably a weird spot for detectives to be in. Jesse and his siblings were legally the children of Crystal, their adoptive mother. While Cynthia had every right to be concerned, the fact that she hadn't seen the children in years, not for lack of trying, probably wouldn't offer the police department any insight into where he might be, and finding him was priority number one. That being said, they had a concerned biological relative who, at the very least, should have probably gotten a call back if for no other reason than courtesy, though we do know that they were all hands on deck at that point, searching nearby lakes, canals, and even drainage ditches. A few days passed with no new updates, but then there was a big one. At 9:34 a.m. on August 11th, 12 News posted a photo of upwards of 40 law enforcement vehicles in a desert-looking parking lot in Buckeye. According to AZ Central, there were 80 searchers on foot as well as on ATVs, and they were there in regards to Jesse. Within 10 minutes, there was news that the FBI was on scene, and photographs taken showed them in those jumpsuits they'd been wearing when removing items from Jesse's house. One reporter was asked to stop filming across the street, and the rest were made aware that a briefing was coming in the next 30 minutes. Whatever was happening here was major, and it was moving quickly. Media scattered from the road and headed towards the police station to get their cameras ready and started rolling. One officer told the media that at 5:15 that morning, the FBI, the police department, and MCSR began a secondary search of the area around Durango and Miller Streets. That sounded like a pretty big deal, and it was, but this officer didn't really seem to know much about why they were there. He caught a lot of flack for this lack of information, but honestly, it seemed more like he was just doing what he was told by the FBI, and someone from the department told him that he should talk to the press. All he could say was that he wasn't aware of any particular reason they were searching the area again, but the FBI had called and organized this search, and they plan to be out there until around 11 a.m. The FBI doesn't plan 5:15 a.m. 6-hour searches for nothing. Live feeds panned back to the scene, and law enforcement was filmed digging with shovels in the area just a 7-minute drive from Jesse's home. A few hours after the search wrapped up, reporter Mike Watkis posted that there were 5 large police vehicles outside of Jesse's home, and detectives had gone inside. The words recovery option were being used, so the community sat in deafening silence, waiting for some kind of update that never came. There was this massive show of resources, and it looked extremely pointed, but then there was just nothing. The lack of updates were excruciating for the town, who had fallen in love with this little boy. Later that afternoon, ABC 15 released a video, and while it wasn't pertaining to the search that day, it was eye-opening. The video they shared was from the body cam of the officer who had found Jesse at the neighbor's house just a couple of weeks before he went missing. In it, you can see that the neighbor called 911 after noticing Jesse in his yard at around 4 a.m. By the time police got there, Jesse had climbed into the back of the neighbor's truck and was just sitting. He was holding what looked like a bottle of water and maybe a snack, and he wasn't wearing any shoes. You can see the officer ask Jesse some questions, but he's hesitant to answer and appears generally uncomfortable. Eventually, the officer asks Jesse if he lives with his grandmother, and Jesse says yes. And of course, we know that's not true, but Jesse, in that moment, felt like that was the best answer he could give. He also told the officer that his auntie lived with him as well. When the officer asked Jesse if he wanted to sit in his patrol car, he seemed to perk up a bit and then followed him over. In the car, Jesse said that he used to go to school in the middle of the night and doesn't know where he lives. Over and over, the officer tries to get information about where Jesse might live, but he still claims that he doesn't know. The officers did eventually determine that he lived just 2 doors down, so they took Jesse back to the house and Crystal answered the door. She told police that Jesse is a handful and seemed to try and explain away how Jesse climbed out of his window onto the electric box and onto the ground. At one point, it sounds like Crystal says, "Excuse me, sir, the boy is lying to him," and then starts talking about how she's hard of hearing and has a hearing aid, so some police department told her to change the locks around on his door. I guess she was trying to explain how maybe she doesn't hear when he may or may not try to escape, so some random cop from we don't know told her to essentially lock Jesse in his room so he can't get out. It was a little hard to follow, and it sounded a lot like bullshit. Jesse was adamant, though, that he wanted to go to school, and my heart broke. I have been there, and during my research of this case, I was pretty sure I knew where this was going. Following the release of the body cam footage, former neighbors spoke to ABC and said that they were worried about the kids' well-being before they ever moved to Buckeye. They had previously lived in Avondale, and according to this neighbor, Jesse and his siblings were sometimes locked out of the house after school and would knock on her door asking for drinks and snacks. She said she made them sandwiches and they took them, but came back when they were hungry again. Another neighbor told the station that he fed the kids 2 or 3 times and had seen them waiting in a hot garage for their mom to come home. It is hotter than the blazes of all hell in Arizona, so he went to check on them and said that they were sweating quite a bit. He said he did ask Crystal about this, and she claimed that she had had trouble finding daycare. And I have personally never given less fucks about any troubles because small children were found sweating in a hot garage. These kids were not simply left alone at home unattended, they were left alone in a hot garage. But it gets worse. According to ABC 15, back in 2011, a tip came in from someone who said that they had been to the house a couple of weeks prior and were concerned about the kids, specifically noting one boy with what she called a big head who looked starved. Someone who posted online saying that they were a next-door neighbor echoed that, saying that the kids were so skinny. Avondale police did respond to the home, and shockingly enough, Crystal let them in. According to the report, upon entry, he saw 3 girls in the living room between ages of 18 months and 4 years old. When asked where the boys were, Crystal stated that they were asleep, so she led the officer back to the boys' room, and once inside, he saw 2 young boys, roughly 4 years old, harnessed to their beds. It looked almost like a backpack contraption attached to a 3-foot string tied to the bed. According to ABC 15, Crystal reportedly told the officer that she did that because if she didn't, the boys would sneak out in the middle of the night and come back covered in mud. The report states that the children had no marks on them and there was food in the kitchen, so he left. The officer left. This did not sound right to me, so I reached out to a former police officer and asked what he would have done in this situation. He immediately stated that he would not have simply left. He would have called his sergeant and let them know what was going on and then continue up the chain of command to try and figure out what was going on in that house. Simply leaving would not have been an option. He was honestly the most surprised, though, by the fact that Crystal even let the officer inside. He noted that most times when he did welfare checks, people either didn't open the door or they opened it and then slammed it in his face. The stories about the kids continued to flow in, including one incident where AZ Family reports that police were called on Jesse and his siblings after they had been wandering around a Walgreens for hours. When officers contacted Crystal, she explained that she had told the school not to put the kids on the bus, but they did, and Crystal was at the school. Now, that doesn't make a shitfuck of sense because they'd been wandering around the store for hours, not minutes. If Jesse and his siblings rode the bus 16 miles to school each day, a parental mix-up would take maybe an hour, not 2 or more. Whether or not police verified her claims is unknown, but I'm gonna guess that they probably didn't because the children remained in her care. But since we're on the subject of the school, one woman posted online saying that a friend of hers whose child also went there had a really weird interaction with Crystal. According to this woman, Crystal allegedly tried to leave the school with her friend's daughter, but they didn't even know her. Of course, I can't verify that, but she did supply quite a bit of details. In September of 2016, news broke that a body had been found in the Buckeye Canal and everyone wondered if it was Jesse. The community held their breath, but it was not him. The month ended with no new updates, but in October, Jesse's biological grandmother, Cynthia, organized a search with Arizona Extreme Terrain and Rescue, and they planned to spend the entire weekend searching. Saturday went well, although nothing was found, but Sunday was a different story. The searchers started hearing gunshots, but figured it was just someone shooting into the air. However, that assumption was proven wrong when bullets started whizzing past the search crews on the ground. The search for Jesse had to be cut short due to safety concerns, so the following day, Cynthia started a Facebook page to try and keep Jesse's name in the media. Unfortunately, it never gained much traction. On October 14th, 12 News announced that an update would be coming later that night, and the teaser mentioned a court date. By the end of the evening, CBS 5 was reporting that Jesse's mom, Crystal, was supposed to have had a hearing that day in regards to her kids, but she never showed up. According to KFVS, the judge wound up issuing a default on her behalf, which allowed the courts to proceed without her. The children wound up being placed back into the foster care system. In November of 2016, remains were found about 35 miles south of Jesse's home, but they weren't his. By December, most of his flyers had fallen down, and the yellow ribbons that once lined his bus route had faded. Additional remains were found shortly after Christmas, but those weren't Jesse's either, and by January 1st, 2016 had turned into 2017. It seemed insane that a child could just vanish without a trace, but based on what the public was seeing, that was all they knew happened. There was no evidence, no new leads, and no Jessie. By the end of the month, AZ Family reported that police were checking in with the state about why lab results hadn't come back yet, but they didn't specify what had been tested, just that it came from the home. The state responded that they were not aware of case details and whether or not a department is waiting on their results, but maybe, just maybe, from now on, we assume that they are. A rush order was sent to get them back ASAP.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
March 16th, 2017 should have been Jesse's 11th birthday. Somewhere out there, his twin sister was having to celebrate their day without her other half. Someone who appears to be close with Jesse's biological family posted online that his siblings have had a really hard time with his disappearance, and without getting too personal here, they needed additional resources to deal with whatever happened in that house and the absence, the utter not knowing of what happened to their brother. Time ticked by, and in April of 2017, the remains of a small child were found in a field about 30 minutes from Jesse's home. At that moment, ABC 15 reports that there were 138 open cases of missing children in Arizona, and that could have been any of them. Residents of Buckeye held their breath once again, but once again, it wasn't Jesse. According to reporter Mike Watkiss, the remains belonged to an infant who'd been buried with blankets, a stuffed animal, and a handkerchief. June 17th of 2017 marked one entire year since Jesse was seen. While billboards still stood along the highway reminding the community that he was still missing, the coverage of his case dwindled. The rest of 2017 continued with no updates, and it was almost like the world had forgotten about little Jesse Wilson. On March 8th of 2018, AZ Central broke the news that a street sweeper had pulled over near Broadway and Oglesby to stretch his legs when he noticed something strange on the side of the road. He got closer to get a better look, and that's when he realized it was skeletal remains. Law enforcement was called to the scene, and then more law enforcement followed. Damn near every news station was airing live feeds from above, and the entire world watched as numerous tiny little evidence markers were placed in this vast, barren field. According to 12 News, officials were unable to determine whether the bones belonged to an adult or a child, let alone a male or a female. They were sent off for DNA testing to get more information, and everyone had to wait. This location was not far from that 5:15 a.m. search the FBI had done and was roughly 6 miles south of Jesse's home. Jesse's 12th birthday passed with no update, but on March 27th of 2018, it was finally confirmed. The 30 bones found just 6 or so miles from Jesse's home were his. Jesse's mom, however, no longer lived there as she had recently sold the house and moved out of the state. Buckeye PD released a statement saying, "While this is not the outcome for which any of us had hoped, we want to stress that this is not the end of our investigation. The Buckeye Police Department, along with our state and federal partners, will continue to pursue this investigation until its conclusion. We believe this case will be resolved as Jesse deserves nothing less." While it can be hard to determine a cause of death from partial skeletal remains, and considering every natural element that Jesse could have been exposed to, the department was clear when they said that they were investigating Jesse's death as a homicide. His official cause of death, however, was listed as undetermined. According to AZ Central, his bones contained many fractures and breaks, but the medical examiner wasn't able to determine whether or not they were caused before or after his death. Following the discovery of Jesse's remains, nothing moved quickly. But in May, AZ Central got a hold of emails that showed that the FBI and the police department had been working to build a nobody case against Crystal since the first couple of weeks of his disappearance. The outlet stated that police believe Jesse was killed elsewhere and then his remains were discarded near where they were found. They guessed that when the area was searched the first time, his remains were probably underwater due to that location being an irrigation runoff during Arizona's monsoon season. It was also noted that 2 different allergy medications were present in Jesse's system. A forensic pathologist told 12 News that while Jesse could have been given the medication for allergies, sometimes those medications are also used as sedatives. The reason they were in Jesse's system, no one knows. On December 28th of 2018, 12 News got a hold of 400 pages of documents detailing the life that Jesse and his siblings led prior to his disappearance, and it's gut-wrenching. According to them, prior to living in Arizona, Crystal lived in California and had 6 foster children removed from her care. She'd reportedly withheld food as punishment. As it pertains to Jesse and his siblings, though, the outlet reports that the kids would come to school with unbrushed hair and teeth and with their shoes on the wrong feet. One person reportedly told officials that the kids didn't get dinner at home and were always hungry. They ate breakfast and lunch at school and would eat everything on their plates, including the stuff that most kids would leave behind. They would also take extra snacks. Further reports allege that Crystal continued to withhold food as punishment and would lock Jesse in his room for extended periods of time without access to a bathroom. He would have to go in his room. His room only contained a bed and a small dresser, both of which were bolted to the wall, just like that neighbor had said. There were no sheets or blankets on Jesse's bed, just a mattress covered in plastic and no toys or personal items. When Crystal was questioned about whether or not she rationed the kids' food, she reportedly told detectives that if punishing a kid by not letting them have dessert is abuse, I guess I'm guilty. But when detectives went to the house, 12 News reports that the fridge only contained liquid. 1 box of wine, 2 bottles of wine, and liquor. DCS statements that came out the following month allege that Crystal reported she didn't even drink, but the 12 bottles of liquor they found on her dresser seemed to suggest something else. She also reportedly told investigators that she never locked the kids' doors, but that body cam we talked about earlier might also suggest otherwise. According to 12 News, when investigators went inside the house, the handles of the doors had been flipped, so they all locked from the outside. They also found those shoulder harnesses attached to the beds. The outlet also alleged that Crystal told investigators that Jesse and his brother suffer from bipolar disorder and ADHD, but as far as I can find, there is no medical records that back that up, at least none that have ever been referenced or released. I would love to tell you that following the release of those documents, something happened with Jesse's case, but it wasn't until December of 2022, yes, I said 2022, that the Buckeye Police Department announced that they'd be holding a press conference. Media rushed to the location, and it was there that the department finally announced that they had made an arrest. According to ABC 15, a grand jury had indicted 54-year-old Crystal Wilson on a charge of abandoning and/or concealing a body. That was it. She'd been taken into custody the previous day in Georgia, where she had been living. Following that announcement, people in Georgia, multiple people who claim to have worked with Crystal, were shocked. They claimed that she had lied to them about where she was from and had even told them that she didn't have kids. They were floored that the woman they thought they knew was involved in anything like this, and it terrified them. Obviously, the public was disappointed that this was her only charge, but the department stated that they had yet to get any explanation as to what happened to Jessie. ABC 15 quotes the department as saying, "Crystal knows what happened, she's not telling us." They noted that they do believe neglect may have played a role. According to AZ Central, back in 2020, a new detective had been assigned to the case for a fresh set of eyes and was reportedly able to find visual and DNA evidence that placed Crystal near where Jessie's remains were found. Her bond was set at $50,000 and Crystal pled not guilty. Her trial was set to begin in July of 2023. 6 months later, Crystal's attorney argued that her bond was unreasonable due to the weak and circumstantial evidence against her, plus she had no previous record. The prosecution argued that if she bonded out, she had no current ties to the area and Jessie's brother was worried for his safety. According to AZ Central, the kids claimed that Crystal physically abused them and left them malnourished, even though every DCS complaint came back as unfounded. In the end, the judge ruled in Crystal's favor, and she was released on her own recognizance. Essentially, they told her, "Have a nice day, we'll see you at your trial." Though she was put on GPS monitoring and barred from contacting any victims, witnesses, complainants, or arresting officers. I have never, ever seen a stipulation that barred someone from contacting arresting officers. What we don't know about this case has to be vast. Crystal's trial was supposed to begin in July of that year, but it got continued over and over again. Then, in March of this year, 2024, the unthinkable happened. AZ Family reports that the prosecution dismissed the case against Crystal without prejudice, citing lack of evidence. Now, without prejudice means that they can charge her later if they choose to, but they're certainly not doing it now. Crystal was able to go home to wherever that is now as if none of this ever happened. The chief of the Buckeye Police Department released the following statement. "We are disappointed the criminal case against Crystal Wilson will not be moving forward at this time. The Buckeye Police Department understands its role and responsibility is to bring a successful outcome for a child who deserves justice. I have personally spoken with Jessie's biological grandmother, and as a department, we share in the heartache she is feeling. The bottom line is Crystal Wilson is the only person who knows what happened to Jessie." He reiterated that this case is still an active homicide investigation. And it was then, and only then, on that day, that AZ Family reported that Jessie's blood had allegedly been found in Crystal's car. To this day, no one has been held accountable for whatever happened to Jessie Wilson, who would have turned 18 this year. His case remains open as an active homicide investigation. If you have any information as to what happened to 10-year-old Jessie Wilson, please contact the Buckeye Police Department at 623-349-6411. For photos pertaining to this case, check out Jessie's highlight at the top of my Instagram profile at the Heather Ashley, and join me there on the first Monday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern, where you go live with me and we talk about today's case and all other true crime cases on your mind. To get access to ad-free and bonus episodes, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/BigMadTrueCrime, or for just $2 whole a month, your episodes are totally ad-free. And if you have a case you would like to hear covered, please share it with Big Mad True Crime on social media, because all cases are covered by listener request. I'll be bringing you a brand new case a week from today, and I cannot wait. But until then, we out. All right, guys, we are officially at the end of this episode, which means it's time for me to review, just kidding, read a review that made my entire whole day. This one is from Danny Joseph, and it says, Big Mad TC is fantastic. You're fantastic. Thank you. Heather is a captivating storyteller. Her passion and talent burst out of every episode. I tried this podcast on the enthusiastic recommendation of my favorite podcasters, The Prosecutors. They were so right. I became hooked on BMTC after 3 episodes. Great, thorough research and presentation. Keep it up, Heather. You're amazing. You're amazing, Danny. Welcome to the fam. I'm so glad you're here. You're the best. Thanks for being nice for literally no reason. And also, The Prosecutors are awesome. So shout out to them again. We will volley back and forth, pumping each other up, because if you guys are ever listening, or just kidding, wanting a podcast to listen to and you're like, I don't know who to listen to, try The Prosecutors if you haven't already. It's educational as fuck. Anywho, thanks, Danny, for being awesome. You're the best. That was really nice of you and very flattering. So thank you so much. All right, guys. If you made it this far, we're at the hot take, and it is so hard for me to collect my thoughts in a way that is careful enough for me to discuss this case where no one has been convicted. Please bear with me. What the fuck? There are so many red flags here. It's always a huge red flag to me when parents in a situation, anything similar to this, or really ever, harp on a child's eating habits. Eating too much, stealing food, sneaking food, like making food something that it's not. For normal, healthy families, food is just always available. But for kids in other situations, food might be available, but they're not allowed to have it. Or food might be treated as a reward and not a right to consume. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say these things without being like, I have to be careful because nobody's been convicted. There is a concern when food is turned into something it's not. When food takes on a role as a reward or a punishment or a topic of conversation, and we're talking about a perfectly healthy child. We're not talking about a child who has diabetes or anything like that. We are talking about what should be a regular child. And to talk about him having the runs, this kid is 10, and kids can be cruel. Saying that, of all the things you could say about a child that you love, is so telling, in my opinion. What if he had run away? What if that is what had happened? And he came home, or was found and was brought home, and let's just say he had a perfectly fine home life. He would then have to go back to school to a group of children who would talk about how he's lactose intolerant and is a snack grabber who gets the runs. It was in such fucking bad taste to say that, even if it was just an oops. I was so upset when I heard that. It was just like, he has 2 left feet. He's not athletic. It felt like there was a theme between the boys in the family and the girls in the family. Like, the girls were in the living room. The boys were strapped into beds. The boys will escape at night. That shit. And there has got to be better CPS communication across counties and across states. I don't know why we are acting like these are independent organizations that shall not have any communication with each other when there are this many fucking complaints and this many visits to a fucking house because of the way kids are suspected to have been treated. Fucking take note. Take so many notes. Do it in pen. Put it in digital format. Send it to all the other ones. Have like a massive database wherever they move. Up. So-and-so called on them here. So-and-so called on them here. They investigated in this county. This is what we found in that county. Let there be a national database of CPS reports, CPS investigations. So it doesn't look like, oh, we didn't know about all this. You're shitting me. I read an article that said that when she was being asked about the 6 children she lost to foster care while they were in her foster care, they asked their names and she couldn't fucking remember any of their names. Are you shitting me? Are you shitting me? I'm pissed. You guys, I'm so pissed. And there's not a whole lot more I can say. Why the fuck has anybody been held accountable? Why hasn't anybody been charged with shit? There's been one charge, and it was fucking. And if you have enough probable cause to charge her with that, and it went through a grand jury, so it's not like the cops were like, "I think we can do it." Prosecutor, will you sign off on it? And they were like, "Yeah." No, they presented this to a grand jury, and the grand jury was like, "Bet. You can totally prosecute that. There's enough probable cause to go forward. Have at it." And then the prosecutor was like, "Nah, I don't think there's enough evidence. I'm not super confident in getting a conviction in this." What the fuck? And then a lot of people were pissed off the police department because they're like, "Oh, you didn't do their job." This is one of those times where you got to be mad at the prosecutor if you're going to be mad at anybody. Can't be mad at the police department because all they do is they do the investigation, they take the notes, they put the case together, they hand it to the prosecutor or the grand jury or both, and they're like, "Hey, we did all we could do here. We think that you can prosecute it at this point." And the grand jury was like, "For sure." And then the prosecutor was like, "I think we're going to dismiss it for now. We could always bring it back later. But, I checked. It's fucking later." What's going on? This is one of those situations where maybe you don't yell at the police department because it's not their fault that the prosecutor decided to dismiss charges. They said lack of evidence. We don't know the evidence. Obviously, there's a shit ton more to this case that we don't know about. One day, I'm guessing it'll come out. And when it does, I will let you guys know. I'm pissed. I started talking really fast. I'm about to clap talk. Okay, anywho, I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, love you, bye.